So I wanted to tell you guys a little bit about Dr. Vosloo. His name is Werner Vosloo. He's originally from South Africa and did his training here in the States, but he is one of the absolute best naturopathic doctors I have ever met. He is incredibly thorough, knows his stuff so well, it blows my mind. And I literally feel honored that he's doing my kind of testing before this project because he's that good. We are here, Restore Bioclinic. All right. Hey.
How's it going?
Good, how are you?
Doing good.
Good. Is he ready?
He is ready. Want me
Alright.
to take you back?
Let's do it.
Okay.
Hello, James.
Hey, how's it going?
Come on through.
Run on in.
Thank you.
I'll lean forward.
We might have to get kind of close and cozy.
Yeah,
So-
that's good.
So can I just
Yes.
kind of, so this is Dr. Werner Vosloo, and when did we meet? We met through our little girls, right?
Yes.
Way-
Same school.
Way back. So our daughters go to the same preschool, which is how we actually ended up meeting. And we developed a lovely friendship. And Dr.
Indeed.
Vosloo is just an incredible expert at what he does. One of the best naturopathic doctors I've ever met. And so he's guiding me through this process of looking at my blood, looking at my DNA, looking at what biomarkers are really interesting to look at, which one's really valuable to look at.
Wonderful. Thanks for that very gracious and kind introduction.
Yeah, absolutely.
Shall we work?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. So the blood test that you completed this morning has to do with, exactly like you said, things that we can use to document the baseline and to be repeated at specific intervals to measure the effects and impact on your biochemistry and regulation systems of the deep change protocol. So shall we just tackle them one by one?
Let's do it.
Good.
Can we talk about this quickly?
Oh, yeah.
So the immune and then inflammatory markers. So the first 2 months, of course, I'm working in January and February on reducing my stress. And one of the best ways to measure or look at stress in the body is inflammation.
Yes.
Why? What happens?
I think it's a very complex system. I think from the bottom line is autonomic nervous system function changes dramatically when you are more in a fight and flight or sympathetic dominant state. It changes essentially the downstream cascade from the higher regulatory system downward in gearing up pro-inflammatory systems, which at the most foundational understanding, inflammation is a protective mechanism. In the stressed state, several things happen. First of all, the neuroregulatory system changes fundamentally in how it runs your autonomic nervous system. And when a system is more autonomic, sympathetic, or fight and flight dominant, it literally gears all of your body's systems into a survival and protective drive.
Yeah.
And you can anticipate that the stressed body will have much more inflammation as measured in, the simple things that we use for cardiovascular inflammation, highly sensitive for cardio-CRP, which is a protein that accumulates in the bloodstream when there's more inflammation.
So stress causes inflammation.
Very much so. At another level, we see that in the hypothalamus and the pituitary as the regulatory communication portal to the rest of the body, the way that a stressed versus a balanced system functions is also so very different. From a digestive tract perspective, that's enormous, where you have the rest and digest system function to the parasympathetic system, function to promote healthy levels of salivation. So not only does it help protect dental health, but it helps to start the digestive process. You get an appropriate secretion of stomach acid, pancreatic enzymes. The liver is actually neurologically encouraged to detox, produce bile,
When you're in rest and digest.
yeah,
Yep.
and release bile in addition
Mhm.
to, so that's the secretory part of the upper digestive
Mhm.
organs. And then from a motility perspective, you've got normal motility or movement of the digestive tract.
Mm.
And that bodes well for nutrient absorption
Mm.
and for detoxification,
Mm.
but also for maintaining the actual physical structures of digestion.
Mm.
Whereas in contrast, the fight and flight dominant system, you have dry mouth when you release stress,
Mm.
meaning not so good for your oral health, but also very firmly you don't kick off the digestion right.
Mm.
You don't get the digestive enzymes and elements, especially ptyalin, that is present in saliva. Secondary, your stomach is inhibited from producing enough stomach acid,
Mm.
which is really important not only as an immune mechanism
Mm.
to essentially deactivate microbes that make their way in with food and just living, but also you don't have appropriate motility to move the food that have been acidified or not
Mm.
forward into the digestive tract.
Mhm.
You don't have appropriate secretion of pancreatic digestive enzymes. The same for the liver, does not function so much in terms of stimulating the processing of food that gets digested and goes through the liver first, the metabolism and making harmless of toxins on their way out. That changes in the liver functioning mostly in the stress state on releasing enough sugar into the bloodstream to sustain a fight and flight response.
So in general, the entire system is just, it's in that defensive posture.
It's not nearly as
It's just not
important
doing
as
it
hunker
it's
down
it's
and
as,
fight and flight.
It's
Yeah.
as if it doesn't have
Yeah,
the space
Yeah,
or the kind
absolutely.
of safety it needs,
yeah, and so
because
just
it has other priorities,
yeah, very much so.
keeping you safe by running this fight or flight response, which is really just stress.
Yeah. So if you imagine week after month after year after decade that some of us have been
Stressed.
stuck in a fight and flight
Chronically
response,
stressed, yeah.
the continuous passing through of undesirable microbes that do not get deactivated in the stomach by acid, the inadequate secretion of stomach acid and the other digestive elements, you get inadequate absorption of nutrients with microbial overgrowth. The transit time lengthens, so food that is not properly primed for digestion, that contains more microbes, you get microbial overgrowth, the production of toxins.
Right.
So that causes,
And that's just the digestive system.
yeah, but if you think of inflammation, you know,
yeah.
get the digestive system subject to stress for an indeterminate amount of time,
Right.
and that causes some serious, not just IBS, SIBO, leaky gut, but that translates into a systemic inflammatory response, including the vast majority of our immune system components and brain hormones are in the gut. So if you think of having an unhealthy brain and an
It
unhealthy
begins,
immune
yeah.
system, so this is specifically why I went down this path, because it's
Yeah.
absolutely the most relatable and the most, I think, high priority component of how stress degrades one's health and erodes one's neurologic health.
A lot
if
of
not
the
checked.
a lot of the neurotransmitters, or a lot of the are actually created in the gut and then transported
Very much so.
to the brain.
Some sources say, in
serotonin
excess of
and others.
75 or 85% of that
Wow.
is present in the digestive system. So it seems like it's really important, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna try to de-stress to get the whole machine working better. The inflammatory and stress stuff, we're going to be doing in a separate blood test. But this stuff that I did today, let's get into it.
Very good.
Can we just read each of these and then we'll go into them individually? So
Okay.
we want to measure. Go ahead.
Hemoglobin A1C
Okay.
and GGT, which is a liver enzyme. The CBC, thyroid peroxidase antibodies. T3 or free triiodothyronine, reverse T3. We want to also do the TSH and T4 as the thyroid components, in addition to thyroid antibodies. IGF-1 is short for insulin growth factor number 1. We've got vitamin D, we've got Epstein-Barr virus, lipoprotein A, we've got pregnenolone, apolipoprotein B, a lipid panel with ratios, the comprehensive metabolic panel, and plasma homocysteine levels.
So this is a deep dive into the basic health of my entire body. But in addition to that, outside of this, of course, again, we're going to do the all the inflammatory stuff, which is inflammatory markers like the cytokines, right?
Interleukin 6.
Interleukin 6 and
CRP, things like that.
And some of the others. We're going to do that in a separate blood test. We're doing this one, and then we're also doing the DNA deep dive.
Very good.
So that just gives people a sense of kind of everything that we're doing. So like let's go into the highlights of which of these are most relevant to change over time.
Very good. So the hemoglobin A1C is a very reliable marker of the blood sugar regulation, especially averaging it for the past 3+ months. GGT is part of the liver enzymes that's also covered 3 other liver enzymes in the comprehensive metabolic panel. The CBC is essentially a measurement of the cells in your bloodstream. So it's a direct measurement of bone marrow function and also immune health, your blood's oxygen transport capacity, which is really important for the brain and energy production. The thyroid panel that we discussed has to do with the regulatory center, producing TSH in response to blood levels of T4, and then also evaluating how effective is your thyroid gland at producing the hormones T4, T3, and reverse T3, or the metabolism of T4 in the distal enzyme systems, as the active form of thyroid, which is the T3, and essentially a thyroid anti-metabolite, or literally a brake pedal and a slow down of the metabolism, which is reverse T3, which again, it's really important here in this context because one of the major factors that drives reverse T3 as a slowdown of metabolism is when you're stressed. So the science behind it is extraordinary. We think it derives from, for example, animals that hibernate through winter, like bears, and squirrels, even though squirrels have a slightly different mechanism. When, in this context, when diurnal length changes, so daylight exposure changes, the brain perceives that this is happening. And for example, in bears, it triggers increased reverse T3 and decrease free T3. And you've got an inhibition of energy production, which is literally why bears can use the fat calories that they've accumulated in the summer to survive an entire winter without eating, because you slow down your metabolism. So you think about somebody that is chronically fatigued and they eat very little or conscientiously and they still gain weight and they can't lose weight. This is one of the key concepts, is that as a consequence of stress, toxicity, nutrient deficiencies, you've got your whole thyroid metabolism affected, and you can't think clearly because your brain doesn't have the energy. So this is a really, really important thing, and we can probably talk about this a little more later.
Reducing stress should uptick my energy.
Very much so.
Yeah.
And we can, and this is the reason why I did such a thorough thyroid panel for you, because your levels of stress is directly proportional to how much free T3 as a metabolic energy driver versus the reverse T3, which is the inverse. It makes you feel tired and less energy, and you'll be more likely to store calories rather than burn calories for energy. So this is a really important part.
When you talked about bears, I'm like, I want to go. Sometimes I feel like crawling in a cave for 3 months and hibernating. That sounds pretty good, actually.
So let's see what the biomarkers say. And we've got, did we talk about the IGF-1?
Not yet.
Not yet. So just to finish up and wrap up the thyroid discussion, so we also have thyroid peroxidase antibodies, which is the single most marker of Hashimoto's thyroiditis. It's the most common thyroid disease in the United States. In this context, I included it to measure as baseline if you have thyroid antibodies as a measure of how tolerant or intolerant is your immune system to your thyroid gland. So let's see what that comes out as. IGF-1 is short for insulin-derived growth factor number 1. It is the most reliable measurement of human growth hormone, where growth hormone is secreted in a very, very unpredictable pulsatile manner. You know, if you graph it out, it's literally up and down many times in the same day. So given blood tests for human growth hormone is totally unreliable and not representative of where you may be. Whereas IGF-1 as a downstream product of growth hormone upstream, it's steady and even. So it gives us a really good, again, average of where your growth hormone levels are at.
And IGF-1 is related to the IGF-1 and BDNF are related to, they work together basically for neural repair.
Yes.
IGF has a strong role in brain health.
Very much so, and also in the health of the entire organism. Did you think some more about the BDNF discussion?
Yeah. Do I think it's worthwhile? Like, do I think it's a strong
Does it have merit?
Of, it's really in some sense, it's the ultimate neuromodulator, right? It's the ultimate one in terms of neuroplasticity. It's the strongest indicator of how your neuroplasticity is doing outside of doing a brain scan, kind of, right?
Yeah.
And so I do think it's highly valuable.
If we've got more tests available, then we can stage them more frequently to see what specific month of what you're doing, or when we start doing this treatment, what actually drives the neuroplasticity up or down. And the validity is enormous. So I want to encourage you to say, yes, let's do it.
Kind of the sort of scientific argument, or the kind of body of research for what BDNF as a sort of factor in brain growth is incredible.
Yeah, you can't argue with it.
There's so much research. So
I think let's do it.
All right, so it's now time to go do my blood draw for the DNA test. So here we go. Are you ready for me? All right, let's do this. All right, left arm.
Yeah. That works.
So many pokes today.
Yeah. So many pokes. All right. Well, I got a good vein, looks like. Usually clean it twice. All righty. I'll poke now. Poke.
That's a bit.
Feel one of the tubes. You did great.
All right, we are all set. DNA is off to Germany. All right, I am officially done with most of my blood work and DNA testing, in the sense that I've done the draws. We'll see what the tests bring back. We'll see in general kind of how I'm doing in my biology, but then more specifically we'll try to start tracking that change over time. So that was a big day. Anyway, I'm really excited to see what this all shows in, again, kind of looking at these deeper bio and cellular markers to kind of see where the kinds of changes I'm trying to make in my behavior and in my habits and in my brain over time, how that affects not just my brain but also the rest of my body. So anyway, day one of testing is done.